So then let's begin with a word of prayer. Father, each year and even each day, help us always to remember how you passed over the Jews, your Hebrew people, and the time in Egypt, to remind them how much you cared for them and what you were going to do for them. Bring Passover to mind in our lives as well, how you favor us with your love. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. Mark, Matthew, and Luke.
I'll take Mark.
You got Mark? Okay.
I'll get Matthew.
Matthew's gone. You always do.
I know.
All right, well, then let's begin by understanding it's Thursday morning, April 6th, in the year 30 AD. We're going to be in the temple area eventually. Start with Mark, chapter 14, verses 10 and 11.
Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. And he sought an opportunity to betray him.
Okay, what does this tell you?
Sad.
It's sad.
That somebody's bad like that.
He's so evil that he was put in the 7th layer of hell by Dante, right there at the worst possible place, with popes or whatever, with Satan himself. Terrible.
Well, so clearly the Jewish leaders, number one, of course, we know they were afraid, but the Jewish leaders probably thought they were doing the right thing.
I'm sure they did, absolutely.
And Judas, who knows what his thought process was, but our Gospels make it clear that he wasn't going to have any control over his thought process. He was going to do this.
Oh, I agree with you. He had at least decided to do this,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, and we're going to explore that as to why he did what he did. Okay, but here we have, he's going to go this in the morning. He's going to go and he's going to intentionally betray Jesus. Now, somehow I just doubt that he goes out thinking, I want to betray him. I've been with him 3 years now. I've been the treasurer. I want to betray him. That's an odd thought to me. Okay? So I'm going to question that for you later. But they didn't approach him, apparently. He decided to do this. Mm-hmm. He must have been way out in left field here. To do this right off the cuff. Kind of odd. His behavior is strange. But they did not approach him. He approached them. And when they heard his thoughts, I'd like to betray this guy, they go, oh, we're glad. Something isn't right here. But they're promised to give him money. He didn't go out. He finally apparently decided he wanted money or whatever, but he was going to betray him anyway. Apparently, he went in order to betray him. Maybe for money. Who knows why? Okay.
The other side of it is with any of these scriptures, there's a lot of words in there that may very well have been said without real first-hand knowledge of what was said.
Well, Mark didn't have first-hand knowledge.
Sure.
But remember, they're also being written 30 years hence, afterwards. Mm-hmm. Or 40 years. So they're reflecting some other thoughts sometimes. These are authors writing about it. And they have their biases as well, just as we do. Their traditions, just as we do. So we're going to try to break into that a little bit and kind of loosen it up. And then he began to seek how to betray him at the right moment, right? All this is normal for you. We've heard this many times. Any questions or thoughts? In that case, yes?
It's hard to believe that he would be one of the 12 and do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It makes no sense in a way.
But Jesus also made it clear that he knew this was going to happen and when, because it was Jesus' timing.
he had twice predicted this.
Yes.
Even at the supper there, he says, hey, someone's gonna do this. We'll find out.
And I don't remember at all where it was, but possibly in the Psalms, there's reference to, something being betrayed.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Prophecy,
Yes.
okay. All right, Matthew 26, 14 and 16. Let's see if there's any difference here.
Okay, I got this.
Go ahead.
When one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I betray him to you?" They paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he began to look for an opportunity to betray him.
What does this tell you? What's different? What's new?
Well, this one, they're making a bigger thing of he went asking for money.
He went asking for money.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they, go ahead.
Yeah, and the other one, it's like, they were glad about this and said, hey, we'll give you some money.
It sounds that way, yeah. Either way, it doesn't contradict it,
Yeah.
you
Is that
know.
a lot of money in those days?
Yeah, that, a piece of silver was worth, I think, a month's wages.
Well, I think the 30 pieces of silver.
But that's also, go ahead.
that also goes back to some prophecy thing.
It's
but
also in the scripture, right?
it
In the Old
seems to me it
Testament.
was like a month's
Month's salary.
or
So
something.
you got a good 2 years salary here. That's a good chunk of money. Okay? So, and this is money he didn't have to report to the IRS. I mean, to Jesus, because he was the treasurer. Okay? So, he was then, once he had the deal, then he began looking for an opportunity. It's like, hello, wouldn't you have thought that out ahead of time?
Not unless they were gonna give you money.
Well, yeah, but you still plan it,
Yeah.
and then you get there, they say, well, how's it gonna work out? And you tell them the plan, they give you the money. Or they give you the money and you tell them the plan. So, but it's just interesting. Doesn't mean anything. It's just interesting.
I'm guessing in Jesus' ministry that maybe his disciples didn't know a long time ahead of time just where they're going to be and what they're going to be doing at that time.
They had no idea, to tell you the truth. We'll
Yeah.
find that out.
Well, I mean, Jesus said we're going to Jerusalem. They got that.
Yep,
But that doesn't tell you a whole lot.
it really doesn't. And they don't know where they're gonna stay or do or whatever. They
Yeah.
really don't know. They've been staying off in Bethany, as you know. He'd go over the hill after the evening in the temple. He'd go over the hill and stay in Bethany. And then in the morning he'd come back in, either confront them or they confronted him.
So in my mind, then, for him to have to look for an opportunity, how else is he going to connect them together?
Yeah, so he's gonna now look for an opportunity. Details, work out the plan. Okay, and then, let's go with Luke 22, 3 through 6. Oh, okay, here we go. And Satan entered into Judas, who was called Iscariot, belonging to the number of the 12. And he went away and discussed with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. They were glad and agreed to give him money. So he consented and began seeking an opportunity to betray him to them apart from the crowd. Okay, what does this tell? What's the new information now that Luke adds?
Well, having Satan inside of him.
Yeah, all of a sudden, he's kind of being controlled, it would seem. Satan enters into him. Go ahead.
And then looking for some more private
Good.
area.
Away from the crowd. In some private place, some way they could do that.
Well, to approach him in the crowd that was easy. They could have done that without his help.
And they did, but
Yeah.
not to arrest him,
Yeah.
because that would have been a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let's see, and officers are added to this with the chief priests. Anything else you see here? So Satan is Satan controlling him, or is Satan tempting him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we think of, possession, or what is it, devils get a
Possession.
possession, okay? Possession. This is what happened to him, that he was suddenly no longer Judas and that this devil was taking over? Or was there some thinking process going on that was kind of satanic or devilish? I don't know.
It's for us to sit here and speculate on this is difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know. He could have had multiple personalities that people didn't realize.
Could be.
There's all kinds of things that you could throw out there, right?
That's right.
But the idea that Satan caused this would probably be an easier explanation for people who were side by side with Judas all those 3 years.
Ah, good point. Because Judas was not a problem during the time of his ministry. He was the trusted treasurer.
Yeah, although afterward they accused him of theft.
Of course. So, but notice it's only Luke that adds it. Saying, let me kind of explain what happened to him. Maybe making excuses for Judas. Wasn't his fault. The devil made him do it. Going back to Flip Wilson. Sorry
Sure.
about that. Okay. All of this is interesting. That's all it's supposed to be. Okay? Do you see anything else that is of interest to you? Okay, here we go then. My turn. Oops. On Thursday morning, Judas prepared for the evening. He heard and believed when Jesus said he would allow himself to be killed. The other disciples didn't believe it. Peter sure didn't believe it. Judas believed him. But that made no sense to Judas. Judas was a zealot and believed, along with the other disciples, that the Messiah, with the power of God at his fingertips, would drive out the Romans and then lead the armies of Israel to world conquest. And he also believed Jesus was the Messiah. Now, does that kind of strike you kind of interesting?
How could he believe that and still go through all that?
It's easy.
Is it?
You just hang with me on this one, okay? Hang in there, okay? He believed Jesus was the Messiah, but he didn't understand this concept of dying. That made no sense. The Messiah wasn't supposed to die. Jesus was being strange, being odd. He wasn't acting like any other conqueror should act, raising an army and, stuff like that. But he did believe him to be the Messiah. Here we go. Oh, any other thoughts on this? Questions?
Was it,
Go ahead.
how did you come to the
Conclusion.
that he was a zealot?
Because the person he was always with was Simon the Zealot. They were teamed up.
Wow.
And those two were of that same nature. Also, he's the only one that was not a northern Galilean.
You mean Simon?
No, I mean
Oh, Judas.
Judas was
Yeah.
from Iscariot,
Right.
which was, we believe, down in the southern area. He was more of a zealot. That's how I came to that conclusion, because he teamed up with a zealot always.
Well, he also would have been then probably felt less accepted than the rest of the disciples.
Yes, there would always been that edge of, I'm different. So if he is a zealot, or tending to be a zealot, then he would be strongly believing in Jesus as the Messiah, but there's no chance of him dying, because the Messiah cannot die. This is going to set up some very serious confusion for Judas. Okay? Does that help to answer you? Okay, that's how I came to that conclusion. It's because of his partnership with Simon the Zealot. Here we go. What he did not understand was why Jesus consistently refused to use the power of God to attack and defeat the Romans. If he believed him to be the Messiah, then he should be acting like the Messiah. Maybe Jesus just needed to be pushed a bit. Then, when the pressure was on and Jesus had no choice, Jesus then would use the power of God, call on the armies of angels, and destroy the Romans. Does that make sense? Maybe Jesus was just being hesitant and needed a push.
Well, if he believed he was the Messiah, and
Yeah.
that was
Right.
the idea of the earthly Messiah.
That's right. It makes sense.
The other side of this, we know it's very clear that Jesus was completely human as well.
That's right.
And humans sometimes do need encouragement.
Jesus seemed to be hesitant. Remember a prayer sometime a little later from there's this time the governor saying, look, I really don't want to do this, Father, but if you say it, I'll do it. There's a hesitancy in Jesus to have to do this. Maybe Jesus was aware of a certain amount of hesitancy. He certainly was not using God's power against the Romans.
Yeah.
Judas felt Judas felt that he needed a little push. Press him. Put him on the spot. And he'll respond, because he is the Messiah, he'll respond with the power of God, and he'll bring on the armies of angels and destroy the Romans. Yeah. You see the thinking now? I didn't say you liked it. I said certainly nothing you've heard before, is it? Okay? But there are reasons for each part of this. Okay?
So Judas thinking, I'll make some money out of this deal.
No, he's not thinking money.
Not money.
No, not at all. He wants the Messiah to come into power and be the Messiah. But Jesus is hesitant. He wants what Jesus is supposed to do. He doesn't want money. Money, that's foolishness.
I mean, I guess he'll take it if they give it to him, but...
We'll get to the money part later. I just want you to see the possible thinking process for him. Because remember, he takes the money, turns him over, and then the lady tries to give back the money and then kills himself because Jesus didn't respond to this. So let's slow down with the money part. Let's look at his possible thinking. If he's a zealot, he's going to push Jesus just a little bit, nudge him to use the power of God. Judas made his choice. Jesus could not be allowed to just quit. Jesus was the Messiah, but seemed hesitant to declare it publicly, form an army, and drive out the Romans. Judas got up, gathered his cloak, and left. This is in the morning. There was speculation that he was going on some errand for Jesus, but none of the disciples understood what he was going to do. He up and left. Nobody knew what was going on. He just up and left. It was morning.
Well, and Jesus told him, go do what you've got to do.
Well, that'll be later. That's at the meal. Okay? But Jesus is aware of it. See, that's another thing. Okay? If you're aware you're going to be betrayed, are you going to be betrayed? Especially if you know the detail? Yes, but there's a reason for that. Here what it is Jesus has made a decision. He's going to take, this is his own decision, it would seem. Questions? Here we go. Judas, knowing that the leaders were looking for an opportunity to catch Jesus when there was no crowd around, he had already heard the rumor of it, decided to make contact with Joseph Caiaphas, son of Annas, the real power, and play the part of a betrayer. Judas went directly to meet with the chief priests. No, he's going to play the part of a betrayer.
So if you stop and go back to this whole thing about having a Messiah, the idea was that's going to protect the church, that's going to drive out the Romans, and then Israel will rule their world.
Correct.
And so for this to happen, going to the chief priests, going to the church, so to speak, is not out of line with what he would expect for the Messiah. The Messiah would want the church to be there.
Okay, he would want the temple.
The temple,
right.
I keep saying church.
He would definitely, the church part was a problem. He definitely would want, the Messiah would want the support of the leaders of the Hebrew people, of the Jews.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And Judas is thinking, maybe, that they will press him a little bit to do his job, show support for him, something, anything. But he knows that they're going to be able to push Jesus just enough to let him proclaim himself as the Messiah. So he's going to play the part of a betrayer. It'll sound like betrayal, and it is in a sense, but that's not betraying for his personal gain. It's betraying Jesus by making Jesus do what he wasn't planning on doing, forcing him to publicly proclaim himself as Messiah. Difficult thinking, isn't it? Okay? Anything else here that you see? He had to give them a good reason for this act of treason. That's what they would think. He's pretending to be a treason betrayer. He's got to give them a good reason for it. He convinced them that he was greedy. I'm a treasurer. Something they could understand. They knew money. And that a year's wage, 30 pieces of silver, as prophesied by Zechariah, by the way, paid in advance, would gain them the opportunity they were waiting for. They could have Jesus now, before he could cause any more trouble and away from the crowds. Thoughts? Questions?
It's probably just about right on, I think.
Scary.
Well,
For if we understand that he believed Jesus to be the Messiah, and there's evidence to indicate that, he wasn't being greedy, he was trying to bring out Jesus to declare himself publicly as the Messiah.
and if you believe God is in control and
Yes.
Jesus is from God or is God,
Yes?
then how can you mess that up?
By Luke's little way of going 30, 40 years later, Satan did it, not
Yeah.
But I don't think that seems to be the case. He's the only one who says that. Go
But
ahead.
if as you're saying there, he used that excuse of wanting money,
Yes?
then that still would have been something in the minds of the chief priests. And so later when John says,
Uh-huh.
he made it all money.
Right.
That was,
He was greedy.
that was Judas's motivation.
So let's go a step further than that.
Okay.
Let's look at Satan.
Okay.
Satan is a deceiver. He is a liar.
Yes.
He convinces people to do wrong things.
Yes. You're getting it now. Good.
So if in fact, when Judas did this, if in fact Satan was in him or not, it would have been what Satan would have prodded him to do.
Correct. It was a deceptive thought that he could manipulate Jesus. That's satanic in the sense of he was trying to make Jesus do something that Jesus wasn't planning on doing. He just thought he could force him to do it. That's the wrong thought.
Or maybe he thought Jesus is taking too long to decide.
Yeah, either way.
Let's push this along.
Judas
Yeah.
is going to try to push Jesus. That's the wrong thought. That's the wrong, I don't want to put it satanic, it's not really satanic. It's simply wrong thinking. To try to, are we supposed to tell Jesus what he should do? Are we supposed to tell God what he should be doing? I think maybe not. Okay?
And then if it were some push by
Right.
Satan, maybe Satan thought this was a good way to get Jesus out of the way.
Yes, he did. Do you remember back at the temptation when it was all over? Satan left until the opportune moment, it says.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jesus now is going to be pushed by Satan because this is going to be another of those opportune moments that he was looking for to try to get Jesus to come down off the cross, to tell you the truth. If you want to look ahead, that's Satan trying once again to get Jesus to proclaim Satan. Okay? So, yeah, this is a wrong thought being pursued by Judas, trying to manipulate Jesus into doing what Judas thinks is the right thing to do, which is to proclaim himself the Messiah and take the power of God and drive out the Romans. And to do that, he's got to present it to the chief priests that this is cool. I'm a greedy little guy, and I'll take money because I'm a treasurer and I need more money and I want to, and he does this whole act. Now, you've never seen Judas like this before because they don't tell you this. Okay? But if you look at it and realize that when it was all over, he had taken the money, it had gone just the way he thought, and all of a sudden Jesus didn't take the push. Now he had to rethink it. He now knew he'd done something wrong. He tried to give the money back, get rid of Jesus, it didn't happen. He went out and hung himself. That's not a person who's greedy. I got my money, I'm out of here.
So
There was another thought somewhere.
Profound remorse.
Remorse. And that's totally different from what is being presented elsewhere.
Well,
Yes.
and in support of that, we know that Jesus had sent the disciples out 2 by 2 to heal, to do all of these good works.
Right.
And Judas is one of those.
That's
He
right.
saw these miracles
Yes, he did.
and probably worked some himself.
Yes, he did. I agree with you.
And so when you look at it that way, it all lines up with what he would probably expect to
He
see
would
happen.
believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But he would believe Jesus was the earthly Messiah presented to the Jewish thought. Okay? All right, here we go then. The deal was made. They paid 30 silver shekels, and Judas told them that Jesus would be in the Garden of Gethsemane tonight after the Passover supper. He always went to Gethsemane at the end of the day. Okay? Away from. The leaders stipulated that Judas must lead the arresting guards. Satan, having left Jesus alone since the temptations, would now test Jesus again. Remember then he said, if you are the Son of God, if you are the... He's going to get it again. Satan's coming back to test him again. Now the Prince of Darkness would lead the forces of darkness against Jesus, the Messiah of God. You see how it all comes together?
Mhm.
That's kind of a different way of looking at it.
Yes, it's using all of the scripture and not just certain little pieces of it that you want. The Middle Ages church loved having Satan and Judas all both down there in the 7th level of hell. They just loved that because it was simple. They didn't do research. They didn't think it out. It's like when you have an enemy, you want to picture them as being horrible, not real nice people with families.
And to take it a step further, did Jesus not plainly tell us, you're going to be surprised who's in heaven ahead of you?
He did say that. That's true enough too. Excuse me. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments on this aspect of Judas? And Jesus, remember, said, I have to be betrayed, but woe unto him by whom I am betrayed. There we go. Okay, Mark 14, 12 through 16a.
And on the first day of unleavened bread, when they sacrificed the Passover lamb, his disciples said to him, where will you have us go and prepare for you to eat the Passover? And he sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him, and wherever he enters, say to the master of the house, the teacher says, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? Which was 16a. And let's see. And he will show you a large upper room, furnished and ready. There prepare for us. And the disciples set out and went to the city and found it just as he had told them.
Thank you. Okay. What do you see here?
Well, so to start off with, we don't know what arrangements were made ahead of time.
That's
Jesus
right.
could easily have arranged to have this set up ahead of time, or it could have been
Yep,
Or it could have been just something that was done mysteriously.
okay,
But this seems like a logical thing because we're gonna go eat the Passover together.
right.
They were Jews,
And there were a fair number of them.
yeah.
They gotta have a place, so it could be mystical, whatever, where Jesus is perceiving some guy walking along, follow him, and wherever he goes, the guy has not yet, he's got a nice big room, but he hasn't yet rented it out. Now, remember, the city of Israel, normally Jerusalem is small, it's a nice sized capital, but all of a sudden it's influxes of 150,000 other Jews going, hey, we all want to live somewhere, we all want to serve Passover somewhere. The Romans are gone. Why was this one held for the last moment? Maybe the guy just didn't really want to rent it, or maybe Jesus had set this up ahead of time.
Or
He'd been in town basically
Yeah,
since Sunday. He
that's
could
right.
have
He'd been 6 days in the area.
hold this for me.
Or possibly whoever had rented the room got COVID and so they had to rent it to somebody else.
Let's not go there. Okay. So it's for some reason this room was available, and that's what we're going to start with. Anything else you see?
I think this is all pretty much, we've been following these words our whole lives.
Yes, I agree. He sends 2 guys. He doesn't say who they are. Just
Yeah.
2 guys, random disciples.
Mm-hmm.
And he sends them. He knows where he's going to. He knows where he's going to eat the Passover. It's right.
Well, we don't necessarily
Some guys
have
go,
all the
"What?"
detail. Jesus could have given them more detail.
He could have.
You know, you're looking for some guy that's located here with a green sweatshirt and a,
And a hoodie and whatever.
Seahawks
Yeah,
hat, whatever,
yeah.
yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Follow him.
Yeah.
No one else has wanted his room. He was charging too much.
But if he wanted, a place that was gonna be big enough, he wanted to arrange for it so that the priests and all weren't really
Weren't
watching
aware of it,
where he
yeah.
was gonna be. And so.
Well,
it makes
and the
sense.
guy who owned it could have been a follower and could have approached Jesus ahead of time.
Could well.
Hey, you need a place for the,
Yeah, we don't know. All we
Hey,
know.
I'll just walk down the street with the jar and, your disciples will just happen to bump into me and.
Yeah. See, here we go. Here we go. So let's move on now. Matthew 26, 17 through 19a.
okay. On the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Where do you want us to make the preparations for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them.
Thank you. Okay. Now what do you see? What is Matthew saying that Mark didn't say?
Just a certain man.
Some guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And
when
no detail of how to find him.
well, he doesn't tell us,
Right.
but
But Matthew
to a
did.
certain man, clearly he told them what man.
And that Mark made that clear. Okay? But he says, my time is near. I am to keep the Passover at your house. There's an arrangement there. Some sort of arrangement. Okay? Because you don't just, do a psycho vibe on the guy and he's suddenly willing to do that. There's an arrangement here. Jesus has made some sort of arrangement. But he's keeping it quiet so that very few people know where he's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because of the chief priests and their desire to kill or capture Jesus.
And he needs to have this last time with them.
Right, and he doesn't want this information to get out because other people might go yada yada. So he's keeping quiet, but he set up this signal. This guy carrying a jar, follow him, etc. Okay? Anything else strike you? All right, then Luke 22, 7 to 13a reads, "Then came the first day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. And Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, go and prepare the Passover for us so that we may eat it. They said to him, see, where do you want us to prepare it? They didn't know. And notice it's Peter and John now, okay? And he said to them, when you have entered the city, a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house that he enters. And you shall say to the owner of the house, the teacher says to you, where is the guest room in which I may eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a large furnished upper room. Prepare it there. And they left and found everything just as he told them. What does Luke add? What's new here?
Well, the guy in between, with the jug is
Right.
the go-between. He's not
Right,
even.
he's not even the master of the house.
Yeah.
What else? Anything else?
Oh,
Oh,
yes. So, yeah, this always confuses me. The first day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed.
good.
So, but didn't we always think that the Passover lambs are sacrificed on Passover?
This is the beginning of Passover.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing on that.
They're eating that evening. The Passover lamb is eaten in the evening. That's Passover, is during the nighttime.
Well, I thought Passover was Friday night.
We're going to have to just figure this out because the Gospel of John has another problem here. We'll get to that later. Okay, very good. That's well said. But here it says that the Passover lamb will have to be sacrificed on this particular day. Okay? And that that's part of the preparation. Okay? When you enter a man carrying a pitcher jar, follow him, then say to the owner, where can I have your guest room? Okay? And it's ready. Anything else strike you? Nice, large, furnished upper room. That would have gone for a pretty penny, wouldn't it? You would think. Maybe. All right, here we go.
So
Yes.
I think this upper room also, well, it may be furnished. We don't know how it was furnished. It could have been too big for him, too small for him. But where I'm going with this is I think we often get influenced by the painting of the Last Supper.
Oh, that was
And-
historic.
Yeah.
Michelangelo had the vision of the reality of it.
Sure, and it's a great painting.
Yeah. It's not
But
real.
the point is, it may have been different from the way we envision it. We wouldn't know.
It is different, and we'll see that
Didn't
next time we
they
get
have
together. We talk about the
low
Passover.
tables?
We'll talk about that next time we get to the Passover. Okay, this is preparation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Here, let's move on now. Hear me. Later that morning, some disciples asked Jesus where they would be eating the Passover meal. Jesus asked Peter and John to oversee the preparation. His instructions were simple. Go to the pool of Siloam and watch for a man to come with a jar and draw water. The pool of Siloam is down here, the southern end. So he's sending him down here to watch for this guy. Okay? Normally, if a man would draw water, he would carry a wineskin rather than a jar. This was unusual for him to be carrying a jar. So you're looking for an unusual person. Jesus is being secretive here. He's protecting it.
Wouldn't most of the water be drawn by women anyway?
Yes, also. But if it was a man, he'd be carrying a skin.
Mm-hmm.
That would be normal.
Why is that, and how do you know that?
That's tradition. That's standard. That was standard understanding at the time, apparently. But
Well,
so for
a
man,
jar is fragile. A skin you can kind of beat around too.
Yeah, a minute.
Well, I mean,
we're
that's-
not gonna go there. Okay.
But that's how you carry.
Right,
fluid.
any distance.
Yeah.
So he's going to be carrying a jar, okay, a pot. This is a signal that Jesus had arranged. Remember, Jesus is wanting to get together with them privately without being disturbed. They won't ever, so he's arranged this way. The disciples don't know where they're going. Judas doesn't know where he's going. So he's arranged for a man, a servant, to be carrying this jar of water. Follow him. That's all. He's that unusual. Okay? All right, here we go. This secrecy was important because Jesus wanted to share the Passover meal with his disciples undisturbed. Yet he wanted to eat it in Jerusalem. Nobody, especially Judas, knew where Jesus and the disciples would be eating the meal. But everyone knew that Jesus would go to the garden afterward. He always did, all that week.
So also, it's not just Jesus' disciples. He had gained a lot of notoriety, and if crowds knew where he was going to go, there would be a crowd.
There'd be no, yeah. So remember how easy it is for people to keep secrets. And a group of 12, 14 people, easy to keep a secret.
Yeah.
Nobody would tell anybody. So Jesus has purposely set up this system whereby he gets the room and he gets to be private with the disciples that evening. Okay? Any question, thought, or comment? Peter and John did as instructed. They went to the pool at the southern tip of the city of David, sat down nearby, and waited. They finally uncovered these are the steps leading down into the pool of Solomon. Okay? Jerusalem is off the temple is off to the right, up above this hill. This is the very southern end of the hill.
And so that is the place where everyone came to get water?
Yes, it's a huge pool.
Okay.
Okay, this was one of the places to do it. It's not the only place, but this was the one where there was a large area for a lot of people.
Was not this also considered sacred water where people had come to be healed?
No,
That's the wrong one?
no, that would be up north in the north
that
at
was
Bethsaida. Bethsaida.
Okay.
So at Bethesda, thank you, named the hospital. So this was simply a large mikvah, essentially, where people would go down, be cleansed, and going on up into the temple area.
But they're drinking water there too?
Oh yes, absolutely. Okay, here we go. The homeowner showed them a furnished upper room. They then arranged the furniture, the low table, and the cushions on which they would lie while eating. This is a general looking of the buildings according to the model in Jerusalem today. An upper room might look something like this. So that's the one I'm going to use. You'll see it frequently. Here's the regular place, and here's the upper room. Could have been any one of them, doesn't matter. They cleared the house of all leaven, yeast, which the homeowner took to the temple before noon to be burned by the priests. Standard procedure. They made sure there was sufficient bitter herbs, spices, haroset, which is a fruit and nut mixture, unleavened bread, and wine. All that remained to be done was the sacrificial lamb. This is a standard Passover meal with all these specific items. Questions? Thoughts? Sure enough, a man carrying a jar did come to draw water. They followed the man across the Central Valley. This is the Central Valley. There's the temple area. Okay? This is the city of David. They came across the Central Valley to this area here, over here. Okay? Called the Upper City, to a house. They asked him where the room was in which Jesus and the disciples would commemorate Passover. And that one there. Or wherever. It doesn't matter. Okay? But it's the upper city, is what it was called. And there he finds this person come from down here. Down here at the southern end is where the pool of Siloam is. He came up here, across the valley, and up to wherever it was that his house was, carrying this jar of water. Okay? Any questions? Thoughts?
No, other than just, like all large cities, a large house or a house with extra space would be a premium, so this is probably a wealthy part of the town or a wealthy person.
This is definitely not the wealthiest, but is a pretty good income area. Absolutely. To be in the upper city, you were doing fine. Okay, Mark 14, 16b, Matthew, Luke, all say this. You don't have to even look. And they prepared the Passover. They've got the room set up. They've got all the ingredients there. Now all they have to do is the following. At 3 p.m., there was a threefold blast of the ram's horn from the top of the southwest corner of the temple complex. Here. That's the southwest corner of the temple complex. All the way out to blast out to every here, 3 blasts of the ram's horn. Okay, at about 3 p.m. Now was the time for the Galilee Jews to come to the temple with their lamb and to be prepared for the Passover meal. So the blast goes out, and then here's what happens. John took the unblemished lamb, put it over his shoulders, and headed for the temple. Then he waited at the Nicanor gate outside the court of the priest for his turn to enter. This is in the temple complex itself. You go up, this is the court of the women here. You go up here, and you go through those doors into the sacrificial area of the court of Israel. Okay, to have your lamb sacrificed for you by the priest. There's not a lot of room, by the way. It is very crowded. Since you're carrying one over your shoulders, here we go. Once he entered the temple, he found himself packed in tight, shoulder to shoulder, back to chest, with other men and their lambs. Eventually, it was his turn to present his lamb for sacrifice.
So at some point, they would have purchased or brought a lamb.
Correct. They obtained a lamb.
And no doubt a lot of waiting to get through the line to get your turn.
Yeah, be a lot of waiting. Because the room is not that big on the inside.
There's a lot of people.
A lot of people. He handed it over to a priest who quickly inspected it for blemishes, of course, and then passed it to another priest. The lamb was sacrificed and the blood drained into a bowl. The bowl was passed to another priest who poured the blood onto the altar. The lamb was skinned, being sure not to break a bone, and then the skin was draped over the carcass and returned to John. John carried the lamb back to the house where the homeowner placed some blood on the side and top of the door frame. The skin was given to the homeowner as partial payment for the use of the room.
So that would be a normal.
Yep. The theory is, and this is by Levitical law, is that the skin was the payment for renting the room. However, it is my belief there are other services that could be rendered that would have to be paid for. In other words, to make a true profit, it's not just this one skin that's going to do it, or two, whatever. You need more money for the table, the how to set, to get all the other stuff. The homeowner would ask for more money.
Women to pay for the
Women to do the serving, whatever it takes.
cooking the lamb.
Thank you.
So what did the homeowner want the skin for?
Well, it was the payment.
I know.
You then sell the skin on the market and make money.
So
What do you do with the skin?
So have you ever seen lamb skin used for seat cushions or for?
Oh yeah,
covers?
it's soft
Oh, yeah.
and really nice.
Oh, okay.
They tan it basically, and it's really a very nice little thing. But that was supposed to be the full payment. I don't think that's reasonable. But it was partial. They had to give it to him, to the homeowner. Okay.
And so it was normal then that when the lamb was killed, they skinned it for
Yes.
them.
So they could have the skin available to the homeowner.
Interesting. Or for whoever.
Or whomever. Peter and John lit the fire, got the coals hot, put the carcass on a spit, and began to roast it. That's the standard procedure. When Jesus and the rest of the disciples arrived at the house late in the afternoon, the lamb was roasting and everything was ready. Any questions, thoughts, or comments?
Well, other than the way I understand it, the lamb had to be consumed in its entirety.
Yes.
Or burned.
And a minimum of
Yeah.
an olive size for each person.
Yeah. And so then probably the homeowner got whatever was left also,
And shared it with his family.
or family or neighbors and friends
Yeah,
or whoever.
Whoever who needed it, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's supposed to be fully consumed. Okay? Anything else? In that case, the next time we get together, we'll actually look at Jesus at the Passover.